tried following the advice that I give in Come As You Are, which is to make the most of responsive desire. You put your body in the bed, you let your skin touch your partner's skin, and most of the time your body's going to go, oh, right, this is a great idea. I really like this. I really like this person. And I would put my body in the bed, let my skin touch my partner's skin, and I would just cry and fall asleep. And I was like, well, I need more advice than I give in my own book.
Welcome to Making Polyamory Work. Hi, I'm Libby and I want to thank you for being with me today. I'm a queer polyamorous mom and an integrative relationship guide, and I help people who live and love outside the status quo have extraordinary relationships because relationships are at the core of our well-being as humans. I believe love is why we're here and how we heal. So today I'm super excited to have the amazing force of nature, Emily Nagoski, on my show. If you don't know who Emily Nagoski is, she is the award-winning author of the New York Times best-selling book, Come As You Are, and the Come As You Are workbook. She's also the co-author with her sister, Amelia, of the New York Times bestseller, Burnout: The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle. Her latest book is Come Together: The Science and Art of Creating Lasting Sexual Connections. Emily has a master's in counseling and a PhD in health behavior, both from Indiana University, with clinical and research training at the Kinsey Institute. And now she combines sex education and stress education to teach women to live with confidence and joy inside their bodies. I wish reading that bio could possibly encompass the brilliance that is inside Emily Nagoski. But you'll just have to listen to our conversation and listen to her share everything that she knows in our interview together. And this is a two-parter. So this is part one of our interview together. And we're talking about all kinds of stuff, but mostly we're talking about sex. We're talking about how to maintain a sexual relationship over a long-term relationship. But it's really just so much more than that. And so I'm just delighted to share this conversation with you. So without further ado, let's just dive in. Part one of two parts with Emily Nagoski. Welcome, Emily, to Making Polyamory Work.
Hello. I'm excited to talk to you.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to talk to you too. I actually saw you when you came on your book tour to Atlanta. You were at the Agnes Scott College, and I got to sit right in the front row, and I was just like, will she be on my podcast?
If you were in the front row, you were sitting right by Shamika Thorpe, who is one of my favorite sex researchers currently alive.
No way.
Yeah.
Well, what was awesome too, earlier on this season, I had Aubrey Lancaster on the podcast, and I got her name from your book talk. So
yes.
Yeah, thank you for that.
She's great.
She's amazing. I love her. But let's talk about you.
Okay.
Because that's what we're here for. We'll talk about you and we're going to talk about sex, obviously. But before we just dive into our topic, I'm curious, like, you wrote a book that came out at the beginning of this year. It was amazing. It is amazing. And I guess I just would love for you to tell us some story about how you landed into writing this book.
Yeah. Yeah, because how I got to writing this book is a result of what happened to my sex life while I was writing my first book.
Right.
So I was writing Come As You Are a couple of years after I got married. No, like a year and a half after I got married.
Wow.
And you might think that like thinking and talking and reading and writing about sex all the time is going to be real sexy. It's not. It was so stressful that I lost all interest in actually having any sex with my newlywed spouse. I finished the book. It got better. And then I went on book tour and it got way worse. I tried following the advice that I give in Come As You Are, which is to make the most of responsive desire. You put your body in the bed, you let your skin touch your partner's skin, and most of the time your body's going to go, oh, right, this is a great idea.
Right.
I really like this. I really like this person. And I would put my body in the bed, let my skin touch my partner's skin, and I would just cry and fall asleep.
Mm.
And I was like, well, I need more advice than I give in my own book. So I did what any good sex nerd does. I went to Google Scholar and I looked up how couples sustain a strong sexual connection over the long term. And what I found there made irrelevant the entire sort of cultural discourse around sex in long-term relationships. And in particular, the relationship between sex and long-term relationships and whether a relationship is open or not.
Oh.
Because the deal is you can have great sex or terrible sex regardless of your relationship structure. Because
Wait, say that.
people,
Say that again. Say more about that. I
yeah.
want to.
So I will point in particular to a very important body of research led by Peggy Kleinplatz, the Optimal Sexual Experiences Research. Peggy and her team interviewed dozens of people who self-identified as having extraordinary sex lives. And these are folks of a wide variety of ages, every living generation of adults, people of every sexual orientation, every relationship structure, every gender identity. Well, not every gender identity, but a wide variety of gender identities, kinky and vanilla, just as diverse as it can get. And the deal is that couples who sustain strong sexual connections, the mainstream conversation is, well, you need distance in order to keep the spark alive. Intimacy is the enemy of the erotic, or you need closeness to keep the spark alive. Intimacy is the key to the erotic. And the deal is these people who have extraordinary sex lives, who self-identify as having like optimal sex, don't talk about the spark. They don't talk about desire. They don't talk about how horny they are. They don't talk about wanting sex. They don't talk about spontaneous desire. They talk about pleasure. They talk about liking the sex that they have. They talk about liking their partner. They talk about authenticity and vulnerability. They talk about empathy, empathy, empathy. They don't talk about desire. So the idea of opening up your relationship because you're not experiencing the spontaneous desire that characterized your early relationship and you can't find a way to reignite spontaneous desire, and the only way you can experience spontaneous desire is with a new partner, that's beside the point. Do you like the sex you're having with this person? Then you're doing it right. And if you don't like the sex you're having with this person, then of course you don't want it. It's not dysfunctional not to want sex you don't like.
Wow. So I just want to play that back because I want to make sure I'm getting it.
Yeah.
You're saying that there is a story out there, I think for sure, that some people have of this idea of this spark, right? And I mean, Esther Perel, you didn't name her, but like she's pretty famous for saying, that
in desire, you need a bridge to cross.
Yes, you need a bridge to cross to get to your beloveds. And I love Esther Perel. She's amazing. And so I'm not saying anything like negative or critical about her, but she does have that story. And it sounds like
lots of people want desire.
Sure.
Like for them, it is like the ultimate measure of whether or not their sex life is going well.
Right, right. And it's what we see in films. It's what we hear about in a lot of places in popular culture is that idea of spark. It's that idea of, just spontaneous, I just want to jump on you kind of thing. And so it makes sense that we would have that belief that if that's gone, that we need to go find it again.
That there's something wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. That we need to either go find it again with someone else. And that might lead someone to open their relationship. And also people talk about, this is a common thing that people talk about in non-monogamy, is going and finding that spark with someone else. And then that, kind of getting the juices flowing. And then that bringing the spark back to the other partnership that might be more established. And what I'm hearing from you is that stop chasing spark. That the people who have extraordinary sexual compatibility and relationships, they're not chasing spark. And so maybe think something different here.
So what I get from the research is that if we're chasing spark, we're doing something really different from the people who self-identify as having life-changing, excellent, extraordinary sex, including in a long-term relationship. So if the quote unquote problem we're trying to solve is a lack of spontaneous desire, trying to solve the wrong problem.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So that's a question that I actually have for you, which is, What do you, I mean, you're kind of hinting at what you think the problem is, which is maybe that people aren't liking the sex that they're having.
Sometimes, yes.
Yeah.
But not me. So like, yeah. So there's like a couple of different things.
Right. So what is your story about like why people in the first place in a long-term relationship are having a hard time maintaining their connection so that they need to
Yeah.
read books about it?
Yeah. There's so many different kinds of stories that people have, but let's take two or three examples. Sort of the standard narrative of couples who seek sex therapy. So differences in desire is the number one reason why a
Yeah.
couple of any structure, of any gender combination, of any openness or monogamy would seek sex therapy is a difference in sexual desire. So they go to the therapist, and let's say partner A says, I was really into the sex and it was great, but these days, frankly, I'd be happy if we never had sex again.
Mm.
And I'm sorry that hurts my partner's feelings, but that's just how I feel. I'm going to give this entirely hypothetical couple the therapist, Peggy Kleinplatz, who leads that optimal sexual experiences research. And she will say, oh, that's interesting. So tell me about this sex you do not want.
Mm-hmm.
And are they going to go on to describe sex that feels really like connected and pleasurable and joyful and playful and or are they going to describe sex that is done out of a sense of obligation, where they have to pretend to like things they don't really like, where they have to hide parts of themselves, where it is by rote the same sex they've been having that they never liked in the first place, sex that is, in Peggy's words, dismal and disappointing.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Right? Of course, it's the second kind of sex. And Peggy, being Peggy, will say, well, I rather like sex. But if that's the sex I were having, I wouldn't want it either.
Mm.
So tell me, what kind of sex is worth wanting? And that's where the work begins, where they start working out what kind of sex they actually enjoy together, which is going to require confronting a whole bunch of stuff and maybe exploring aspects of their own internal lives that they have not yet been ready to explore. And then there's a couple like me where I would show up in a therapist's office and be like, I know that like if I could just get there, it would be great. I know
Right.
that the sex that we have is so much fun. I would be so like afterward, I'd be like, that was great. I'm so glad we did that. And
Okay.
I just like, I can't get there. How do I get there? And that was what I needed the emotional floor plan for. It for me was it takes me 2 whole chapters to write about in the book. I tried to teach it in a workshop. It took me more than an hour and a half to talk about in a workshop full of therapists. So, like, I'm not going to be able to explain the whole thing here. But the short version is when I would get into the bed with my certain special someone and I let my skin touch my partner's skin, instead of my body going, oh, this is like sexy and fun, my brain would go, oh, I'm safe now. Because
Mm.
I was in an emotional space of fear. I was so stressed, so anxious, so worried all the time that when my body connected with my partners, it would not interpret it as sexual touch. It would interpret it as straight up safety. I have
Mm.
now found my way to a safe place when I have been so stressed and so threatened by my own internal experience that I can complete this stress response cycle. And that's what the crying was my
Yeah.
body being like, oh, I can let this go. I can be safe. So in a way, it's sort of a beautiful thing. And also it was a super not sexy thing.
Right.
It's okay. So I get out of the fear space, and where am I now? Do I go directly out of the fear space into the lust space in my brain?
No.
Nope. I was exhausted, and so I needed a nap and generally a snack and like a bath. And then my body was in good enough shape that I could then move myself into one of the emotional spaces that I now know is adjacent to the lust space. In particular, the play space for me, where so play is innate mammalian motivational system of friendship.
Mhm.
Play is any behavior that individuals participate in for its own sake because they like it and there is nothing at stake, right? There's lots of different kinds of play. There's rough and tumble play.
So no obligation in there
100% no obligation because you're just doing it because you like it.
and no like agenda.
Yeah. There's
Mm.
nobody has anything to lose. No one's identity is on the line. The relationship is not on the line.
Right.
Whether or not you are acceptable in the relationship is not on the line. There's
Mhm.
no destination. You're just like, let's play this fun game together
Mhm.
because we both really enjoy this fun game.
Yeah.
So that's the play state. So there are 7 total
Rooms.
rooms in this, and like that's a huge house. That's already like a really big house.
Yeah.
And it means that sometimes you're going to be in a space that is not right next to the lust space.
Right.
Like when I was in the fear space, and that means if you can map out how to get from where you are to where you want to be,
Mhm.
which the first step is being able to identify which space you are in.
Right.
Like recognizing, oh, I'm just like super freaking stressed. I'm in the fear space. I am constantly, and the sort of like the one sentence motivation of the fear space is I need to get away. I need to escape. The one sentence motivation of the rage space is I need to destroy this thing that's in my way. Here's a threat. I need to destroy it. That's everything from mild irritation through frustration and annoyance all the way up to anger and full-blown rage. Whereas fear is everything from slight worry and niggles and
Anxiety and
anxiety through
Mhm.
fear up to full-blown terror, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
These are the pleasure adverse spaces. The third of the 3 pleasure adverse spaces is the one that is least recognizable to people because we don't talk about it. It's panic grief, and it's where
Mhm.
shame lives.
Mhm.
So this is related to attachment, the way human beings are like wired to love each other intensely because our babies are born unable to meet any of their own needs. And so if we didn't just desperately love our infants, like hearing them cry, seeing their faces activates a thing in our bodies. It doesn't even necessarily feel good. It just feels very intense that like, here, this one's yours, keep it alive.
Yeah.
And you will do anything to keep your one alive.
Yeah.
And the baby feels kind of the same way.
Yeah.
They know that if their adult caregiver does not help them meet their needs, and that's a baby crying, panic, panic. I have a need. I can't meet it because I was born only 85% cooked. So, like, somebody has to come and help me meet this, whatever. Can't even thermoregulate independently. Like,
Right.
it's nuts. And most of the time, an adult caregiver comes and helps meet the need. But if a baby goes long enough without having a need met, it transitions from I need to get this need met to, oh no, I'm never going to get this need met. And their brain
Mhm.
gets pushed off a neurological cliff into a
Mhm.
pit of despair where it thinks, I'm alone forever. I'm going to die in isolation. It's no longer true when we're adults that our lives literally depend on our attachment object coming when we need them, but our bodies don't know that.
Yeah. Our
They
bodies
call
still do the same thing.
it's called heartbreak for a reason.
Mhm.
Your body is like, I'm gonna die if this person doesn't come back. Why do we have sex with our like while we're breaking up with someone? Because our body's like, you're gonna die if you lose contact with this person.
Well, but so that makes me really curious because you said that that is one of those places that panic grief is usually far from the sex room or the lust room.
Usually, it's a pleasure adverse space. It can
Pleasure
be a
adverse space.
motivation for having sex,
Mhm.
and it can be really intense. And sometimes it's pleasurable, but it's fucking desperate.
Okay.
Just because it's high intensity doesn't mean it's high pleasure. So intensity and valence are the
Ooh.
2 dimensions of an
Uh-huh.
emotion.
Yeah.
Intensity is just how much chemical is there being
Mhm.
released in your brain.
Right.
Valence is direction. Does it feel good or does it feel not good?
Mm.
How good does it feel is intensity.
Okay.
So with breakup sex, you have often really high intensity. And we live in a world that mistakes intensity for pleasure. Like because it felt a lot,
Oh, wait, wait, wait. Say that again. Say that again.
we live in a world that mistakes intensity for pleasure. Just because it feels a lot doesn't mean it necessarily feels good.
Feels good. Oh, yes. Yes. Sorry, I just want to let that land because when
Yeah.
I'm hearing you talk about being in the panic grief space on the emotional floor plan and then moving towards lust and sex to feel better,
Yes.
that doesn't necessarily mean that it's about pleasure.
Yeah. It's just about repairing the
Rupture.
connection.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a yoga instructor, the founder of Underbelly Yoga, Jessamine Stanley, who I quote in the book, she says that jealousy is my kink. And I think this is the neurobiology that underlies people who are like, when my attachment in my primary relationship feels just a little bit, when you're still safe enough in the relationship, when you trust this person, but there's just a little bit of like, oh, that can actually be really motivating.
Well, but here's I feel like you will have something to say on this. What if you are the person who's in that seeking mode? I'm seeking out sexual connection to make myself self-soothe. Basically, I want to feel better.
Yeah.
And you're the partner of that person. And that's the type of sex they're wanting from you.
Which type of sex?
The type of sex to reassure, to calm, to make someone feel better. I'm just thinking about that. And I'm thinking about, specifically in heterosexual dynamics, specifically a male-bodied person, someone raises a man, usually cisgender, heterosexual.
Oh, yeah.
Seeking a woman to have sex with him, to just make him feel better, to make him feel more secure in their relationship.
Because he has been taught all his life, first of all, that he is not so like in the same way that with fear, the biological underpinning is I need to escape, and in rage, the biological underpinning is I need to destroy. The biological underpinning of panic grief is I need help. I need connection, right? And we raise this half of the people on Earth with this lie that they don't have a panic grief space. You don't need connection.
Right.
You're certainly not supposed to like give care. You don't even need to receive care. What you get is horny.
Right.
You're not lonely. You're horny.
Right.
And so they're interpreting every longing. And let me say, connection is a biological drive.
Yes.
It's like sleep. It's like hunger. It's like thirst. Connection. Your body will degrade with inadequate connection. It is the health equivalent to smoking a pack and a half of cigarettes a day. Loneliness is a disease process. Sex is not one of those. Right. If you don't have sex, nothing bad actually happens to your body. There's 70 years of research establishing this. This is not like the least controversial thing that I say, even though people have a lot of feelings about it.
But people mix those two up, right?
Yeah.
That's the problem.
The thing you're feeling, and I know people don't like this word, but the thing you're feeling is loneliness. Like you want connection, and you've been raised your whole life to believe that the only way you're allowed to give and receive connection is through sex. Right?
Right.
And your partner, if you're in a heterosexual relationship, that person was not raised with that message.
Right.
If you get raised as a girl, you may have been taught that you don't have a rage space.
You might have even taught you don't have a lust space.
You may have been taught that you don't have a lust space. But you're probably taught that you're allowed to have like a longing to give and receive connection, right? And sex absolutely is one of the ways that human beings give and receive connection in peer relationships. It absolutely is. It is only one of them. There are lots of other ones. The difficulty only comes in when like partner A is like, sex is like the thing where I feel connected. And so like, if you deny me sex, it feels to my body like you are denying me basic love and acceptance and a feeling that I am welcome on earth.
Right.
And often if a person is saying no to sex, they're just like, I am too tired for sex today. No, thank you, please. But it feels to the other person like they're saying, no, you're not really worth the air you breathe and the space you take. And people need to have that conversation. Like one of the questions I ask people to think for themselves and discuss with their partners is, what is it that you want when you want sex? What is it that you don't want when you don't want sex? Because often when people ask for sex, they're asking for something. And when someone says yes or no to sex, they are saying yes or no to something totally unrelated to that.
So we're going to end it there. You will have to wait until next week to hear part 2 of this conversation, where we talk about maintenance sex, we talk about the patriarchy. It's juicy stuff, y'all, and I'm really excited to share it with you. for now, thank you for joining me today. If you have any thoughts about the conversation or a question for the show, I'd love to hear from you. You can find me on Instagram as thatpolyam_mom, or you can reach me on my website, libbysinbeck.com. Or if you have a question to submit to the podcast, you can submit that at makingpolyamorywork.com. I'll also say that if you're loving my podcasts, but you're looking for more support, I do this for a living. I help individuals, couples, and groups have amazing relationships, and you can find out more about my offerings on my website. Thank you to everyone who has shared my podcast with your friends, your networks, your Facebook groups, etc. And thank you also for subscribing and writing reviews, because those reviews that show up on iTunes, and now you can even rate it and review on Spotify as well, those are a big help for helping people find the show. Making Polyamory Work is created by me, Libby Sinback. It is edited by Finn of the Normalizing Non-Monogamy podcast and hosted on the Spotify podcasts platform. Van de Leon manages the website and posts the transcripts.